In the summer of 1999, a young couple vanished during a backpacking trip through Olympic National Park. They were experienced hikers. They left detailed plans, but they never made it out. For 25 years, their disappearance remained a mystery, until a storm in 2024 toppled an old-growth cedar, and inside its hollow trunk, someone found a water-damaged disposable camera. When developed, the final photo showed the couple, standing at the entrance to a cave, terrified, and behind them, a figure no one can identify. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe if you're drawn to cold cases, recovered evidence, and mysteries hidden in our national parks, solved decades later by the most unexpected discoveries. Date: August 19th, 1999. Location: Olympic National Park, Washington. The sound of rushing water echoed faintly through the firs as Jordan Riley adjusted the straps on his backpack and glanced at his girlfriend. "Almost there," he said, trying to sound confident, even though his map was folded and damp in his back pocket, and the trail markers had stopped appearing over an hour ago. Samantha Blake didn't respond. She stood a few feet ahead, facing a split in the trail where the ferns grew so thick it looked like the forest was trying to reclaim the path. Her posture was tense, shoulders tight beneath her rain jacket, eyes fixed on something off in the trees. "What?" Jordan asked, stepping forward. Samantha didn't turn. "Did you hear that?" Number, what did it sound like? A whistle, maybe an animal. I don't know. Jordan listened, but the only sounds were wind through trees and the distant, uneven crash of a stream somewhere below the ridge. It was their third and final day on the trail. They were supposed to loop back to the Seven Lakes Basin parking lot by sundown, but sometime after their late lunch near Bogachiel Peak, they'd gotten turned around. Jordan had confidence in their gear, their skills, their backup compass, even in the heavy cloud cover. But now, something about the silence had shifted. Samantha took a shaky breath. "I feel like someone's watching us." Jordan frowned, eyes scanning the underbrush. "There's nobody out here. It's just remote. We've seen, what, 2 people in 2 days?" "Exactly," she said. "We're the only ones out here." He stepped beside her, rested a hand on her shoulder. "We're okay. We'll follow the slope downhill and hit the drainage. Then it's an easy mile to Heart Lake. We camp. Tomorrow, we hike out." Samantha didn't look at him. "We're not going the way we came, Jordan." He blinked. "What?" "Look at the moss. It's growing on the wrong side." She pointed to the trunks lining the trail. "That's north, but we came from the west." Jordan opened his mouth, then closed it. She was right. They'd been looping. An hour later, with twilight beginning to blur the forest into deep greens and purples, they found the cave. It was just off trail, if it could even be called a trail anymore, hidden behind a curtain of wet vine maple. The rocks surrounding the entrance were unnaturally smooth, as if shaped by centuries of glacial runoff, though no nearby stream explained the erosion. It gaped open like a black mouth, silent and wide enough to walk through without ducking. Samantha didn't want to go near it. Jordan, maybe out of exhaustion or instinct or dread, agreed. They snapped a photo, their last. The disposable camera Samantha carried hung from her neck, nearly out of film, warped slightly from humidity and age. She raised it with shaking fingers and clicked the shutter. The flash was weak, barely illuminating the entrance. They turned away. They never came out. August 3rd, 2024, Olympic National Park. 25 years later, after a week of record-breaking rainfall and landslides, a storm uprooted a massive cedar tree near a forgotten offshoot trail west of Heart Lake. Inside its hollow trunk, wedged between layers of rot and moss, a soaked nylon bag was discovered by a park maintenance crew. Inside that, a corroded compass, a cracked whistle, a faded topographic map, and a waterlogged Fuji quick-snap disposable camera, still intact. When developed, all but one photo were washed out beyond recognition. But the final frame was different. In it, Jordan and Samantha stood side by side at the mouth of a cave. Her face was pale, frightened. His hand was reaching for hers. Both stared directly at the lens. Behind them, just within the shadow of the cave, a third figure stood. Tall, distorted, and not supposed to be there. August 5th, 2024. Location: Olympic National Park, Washington. Maintenance outpost near Heart Lake. The sky above the canopy was still gray and weeping when Nate Calder pried his boot out of the mud and cursed under his breath. "You said we'd be clearing branches," he muttered, flicking water from his jacket sleeve. Russell, 20 years older and twice as unbothered, shrugged as he stepped over a fallen log. "We are, just big ones." They'd been sent to inspect damage from the recent storm, one that had dumped more than 6 inches of rain on the park in just 4 days. Dozens of trails were closed, bridges down, trees snapped. But this part of the basin was quiet. Too quiet, Nate thought. And somehow, older. He felt like they were walking not through time, but under it. "Trail splits ahead," Russell called back. "Go left with the saw. That cedar's blocking the east loop. I'll sweep the ridge overlook and meet you back at the junction." Nate gave a half-hearted thumbs up and sloshed into the brush. It wasn't a trail so much as a suggestion of one, narrow, overgrown, full of ferns that slapped his legs like wet towels. 10 minutes in, he saw it. The tree. A giant cedar, easily 10 feet across, its roots torn from the earth and splayed like broken ribs. It had come down with violence, churning up rocks and moss and half the slope with it. Its trunk was hollow, ancient, ringed with rot and a darkness that seemed unnatural. Nate stepped closer and peered inside, and there, deep within the cavity, wedged between layers of wet soil and tangled roots, something caught the light. A piece of fabric, blue nylon. He hesitated, then crouched and reached in. It came free easily, a weather-worn drawstring bag, the kind you'd get at a summer camp or school event. Water seeped out as he lifted it. Inside, a small, rusted whistle. A compass whose needle floated loosely in cloudy liquid. A faded topographic map, creased and torn, and at the bottom, wrapped in a Ziploc bag that had long since failed, a disposable camera. Green plastic, Fuji logo, lens fogged. Nate stood up slowly. This was old, years old. Later that evening, inside the evidence lab in Port Angeles, Detective Elise Grayson stood over a table as the last image came into focus. She'd seen dozens of recovered rolls during her time on cold cases, but this was different. Most of the photos were too damaged, white blurs, streaks of mildew, warped light leaks. But the final frame was intact. 2 people stood at the mouth of a cave, a man and a woman, young, late 20s. The woman's hand hovered near the man's. Her face was pale, strained. The man looked like he was caught mid-breath. They were both staring directly into the lens. Behind them, just inside the shadowed cave mouth, was a third shape. Tall, human-like, blurred just enough that it might have moved when the flash fired. Grayson didn't move. "Jesus," said Detective Nolan behind her. "Do we have names?" she asked. "We might. We ran the photo through the database. Best matches Jordan Riley and Samantha Blake. Went missing in the same area, August 1999. Grayson blinked. "That's 25 years ago. Yep, their case was dead cold. They were experienced hikers, left a full itinerary. They were supposed to do a loop hike, 7 Lakes Basin, never made it out." She leaned in closer, and now this shows up, in a hollow tree. Nolan nodded. "With gear, map, and this camera." Grayson lowered the photo slowly. "Reopen the file, we're going back in." The following morning, the knock on Cynthia Blake's front door came just after sunrise. She rarely answered anymore. Not after so many years of silence. Not since the vigils faded. Not since the news stopped calling. but something made her rise from the kitchen table and open the door. The two people standing there looked official. Dark jackets, calm expressions, a shared seriousness. "Mrs. Blake?" the woman asked. "I'm Detective Elise Grayson. This is Detective Nolan. We're here about your daughter, Samantha." Cynthia's hands curled around the door frame. Her voice caught. "You found her?" "Number, but we've recovered something. May we come in?" She stepped back silently. The detectives took seats at the dining room table, and Grayson unzipped the folder. She slid the photo across the wood grain. Cynthia stared, then gasped. "Oh my God!" "That's her?" Grayson asked softly. "Yes," Cynthia whispered. "That's Samantha. And Jordan. That's his jacket. She bought that camera the day they left, at the gas station. I remember. She said she wanted to take pictures in case we don't come back." "It was a joke." Grayson nodded. "We believe this was taken just before they disappeared. We found the camera inside a tree near Heart Lake. The cave in the photo, do you recognize it?" "No," Cynthia said. "But something's wrong. Look, right there." She pointed to the darkened cave mouth. "There's someone behind them." By midweek, back near the ranger station, Grayson and Nolan sat across from Kyle Emerson, the last person to sign the hiking permit for Samantha and Jordan in 1999. He flipped through a weathered logbook as rain pattered outside the station windows. "They were nice kids," he said. "Told me they were doing the full loop. 3-day trip. Should have come back through here on the 20th. "They didn't," Nolan said. Kyle shook his head. "We searched. SAR, dogs, chopper. Nothing. No tracks, no gear. Like the mountain swallowed them whole." Grayson tapped her pen. "Have you ever seen that cave?" Kyle paused. "Not personally, but I've heard of one near that area, off-trail, past where most people go. Locals don't talk about it much. They say it doesn't like visitors." Grayson raised an eyebrow. "The mountain," he said, "or whatever's under it." Nolan closed his notebook. "I think it's time we went looking." August 11th, 2024. Location, Olympic National Park, near Bogachiel Ridge. The forest changed the deeper they hiked. It wasn't just the elevation or the density of trees. It was something subtler, the stillness, the hush between birdsong, the way the wind threaded through the canopy like a warning. Elise Grayson felt it in her legs, in her ribs, in the way her thoughts slowed to listen for something unspoken. She and Nolan moved carefully, their packs tight, boots leaving firm imprints in the damp trail. They had permission, clearance, even a reluctant ranger named Luis trailing behind them with maps and radio equipment. But none of that changed the fact that they were heading toward an unmarked area, guided only by a photograph taken 25 years ago by two people who never came back. "This part of the loop isn't maintained," Luis muttered. "Technically, it's not even on the map anymore." "That's what makes it useful," Nolan said. "Less contamination. If something's been untouched for that long." Grayson didn't answer. She was watching the trees again, cedars, hemlocks, some so wide it would take 4 people to wrap around them. She imagined Samantha standing right here, raising a disposable camera to snap what might have been her final photograph. What had she seen just before she pressed the shutter? By late morning, they reached the stretch Luis referred to as the Ghost Ridge, a narrow, overgrown shelf that curved along the western face of the basin, where several hiker reports had once ended in vague, unresolved disappearances. Grayson stopped walking. To the left of the trail, the trees fell back slightly, revealing a break in the slope. Not a trail exactly, but a path of least resistance. Bare roots, worn stones, a faint scar in the earth leading downhill. And there, half hidden beneath moss and hanging fern, a jagged opening in the rock. She crouched. The cave mouth was real. They set up a small perimeter. Nolan marked the entrance on GPS. Luis took a radio position and made the call to Ranger HQ. They would not enter until full backup arrived, but Grayson didn't need to go inside just yet. The stone around the opening was smooth, too smooth, not like a natural washout, not like a glacial cavity either. It looked shaped. "This is where the photo was taken," Nolan said, kneeling beside her. Grayson held the original print in her gloved hands. The slope matched, the brush matched. Even the angled boulder to the right, now covered in moss, was identical. She imagined Samantha and Jordan standing right here, but the figure behind them still couldn't be explained. Nolan lowered his voice. "You think someone was living in there?" "I don't know, but whatever scared them, it was standing right in this doorway." They didn't go in. Not yet. By the time the full team arrived, search dogs, a forensic tent, cave rescue, they had already taped the area and confirmed no sign of human activity nearby. At 3:15 p.m., a specialist in high-angle entry suited up and descended into the opening. 3 minutes later, he radioed up. "There's another chamber, big, slopes downward. Looks like it splits. I'm seeing... Wait, there's something down here." Grayson froze. "What kind of something?" Nolan asked. "Cloth, old gear, maybe a pack. Looks like it's been buried under silt. Might have been a flood event." 15 minutes later, the first bag came up in a harness, mud-covered, crushed, but intact. It was faded blue, the same brand Samantha's mother remembered her carrying. Inside were 2 waterlogged notebooks, a film canister, and a cracked plastic ID card. Riley, Jordan MDOB, April 22nd, 1972. Grayson stared at it. They had found him. Or at least what he left behind. That evening, back in Port Angeles, the items were laid out on an evidence table to dry. The notebooks were mostly illegible. Ink bled through by water and time. But the final few pages showed signs of deliberate pressure. Someone had pressed hard, trying to make the words stick despite the rain. One page was partially recoverable. "We circled back. This wasn't the way we came. Sam thinks something's tracking us. I didn't want to believe her, but last night I saw it too. It doesn't move like a person, it watches like an animal, but it's taller. And I don't think it blinks." Grayson ran a finger over the indented letters. "It," she whispered. "He was writing about what they saw in the cave." "There's more," Nolan said, carefully flipping the next page. The top corner had been torn, but part of a sentence remained. "If we don't make it out, someone needs to know what we found. It goes deeper, it breathes, there's another way in." Grayson sat back, her heart suddenly thudding. Another way in. They weren't alone down there. 2 days later, at the Seattle Forensic Imaging Lab, the film canister from Jordan's pack was finally developed. Most of the negatives were blank. Years of water damage had destroyed them. But one roll had been sealed in a heat-shrunk black plastic canister. The last few frames were intact, and among them was a second photo of the cave. It had been taken from inside, from the darkness, looking out, a narrow slit of daylight, framed by stone. Samantha stood in the center, backlit, arms raised, maybe in warning. Something behind her was moving, just enough blur to suggest motion, just enough light to catch a reflection, a glint, a shape. Long-limbed, pale. Grayson leaned in. "That's not a person," she said quietly. Nolan didn't argue. August 13th, 2024. Location, Seattle, Washington, Cynthia Blake's home. The photo had been sitting on Cynthia Blake's kitchen table for nearly an hour. She hadn't touched it, just stared. Her daughter, 25 years frozen in time, looked back at her from the mouth of that cave. Her lips parted, her eyes wide. The panic was unmistakable now that the forensic team had brightened the exposure. And there, in the darkness behind her, what everyone tried not to name. Cynthia finally reached out, her fingers trembling as they hovered over the laminated image. She looks older than I remember, she said softly. Not in years. Just tired. Grayson, seated across from her, nodded. We found one of Jordan's backpacks in a chamber past the entrance. That's how we recovered the second roll of film. Cynthia swallowed hard. Did you find anything else? No bodies, no remains. Not yet. Cynthia's hand returned to her lap. But we did find part of a journal, Grayson added. Jordan described something watching them, something that doesn't move like a person, and he mentioned another entrance. Cynthia blinked slowly. You think they were trying to get out? I think they never did. There was a long silence. Then Cynthia stood, crossed the room, and opened a dusty cedar chest beneath the window. She pulled out a shoebox. My husband didn't want to keep any of it, but I did. She removed old photos, a map, and a stack of folded notes. Grayson's breath caught when she saw the map. It was hand-drawn, detailed, with markings that didn't match official park topography. Trails, guesses, loops. One section, far from the marked basin, was circled in red. What's this? Samantha sketched it. She read about old logging roads and cave systems never surveyed properly. She wanted to find something that hadn't been found before. She believed the mountain held secrets. Grayson stared at the red circle. It was miles from the cave where they'd found the photo, but close enough to matter. Back in Olympic National Park, a ground team spent the next 3 days combing the area around the newly discovered cave entrance. They found no footprints, no remains, no gear, no other signs of human life. But on the third afternoon, one of the cadaver dogs alerted near a granite ridge, high up, well above the known trail system. Beneath a collapsed embankment, searchers uncovered a rusted metal hatch, partially buried under decades of debris and moss. It had no visible hinges, no obvious latch, just a round ring handle bolted into the center and the remnants of what looked like caution tape caught under a rock. The soil around it was unstable, but Grayson knelt beside it anyway. This isn't natural, she said. Nolan squatted beside her, his eyes narrowed. Think it was part of an old mine? Maybe. Or maybe it was sealed on purpose. They called in a specialized forensic excavation team. It took 2 hours to clear the overburden without disturbing what lay beneath. Eventually, they revealed the full hatch, nearly 4 feet across, with reinforced steel bracing and faded yellow paint clinging to its edge. Etched along the rim in block lettering, Property of U.S. Interior. Field research access only. Grayson stared at it. This was government property. Nolan exhaled slowly. You think Samantha and Jordan found this? Grayson looked at the map Cynthia had given her, then back at the exposed hatch. I think they found what they weren't supposed to. That night, at the regional evidence facility, the lab tech called her in to review the digital enhancement of the second cave photo. The frame taken from inside the cave. The one showing Samantha. But now, with the contrast corrected and the exposure rebalanced, something else had come into view. On the back wall, behind the motion blur and the rocky shadow, was a symbol, scratched or painted in charcoal. A circle with 3 vertical lines descending from its bottom arc. Almost like dripping legs, almost like a warning. Any chance that's graffiti? Grayson asked. The tech shook his head. Number not spray paint, not even pigment. Looks like it was burned in, maybe with a torch. She stared at the strange sigil. The more she looked at it, the less it felt like a symbol, and the more it felt like a mark, not a message, a boundary. 2 days later, with heavy equipment in place and permits expedited under quiet jurisdiction, the steel hatch was opened. It groaned as it moved, releasing a burst of stale, subterranean air that smelled like rot and wet stone. A rusted ladder descended into blackness. Nolan looked at Grayson. You going in? She strapped on her helmet and adjusted her light. I'm not letting this stay buried. She climbed down first. The chamber below was artificial. Square-cut stone, reinforced walls, corridors stretching into dark. This wasn't a cave. It was a facility, long abandoned, judging by the water damage and collapsed beams. But pieces of equipment remained. Metal desks, bolted filing cabinets, and rusted signage that simply read, Section 4. B. Environmental Anomaly. Survey. Nolan ran his light along one wall. There, etched into the stone in deep, jagged scrawl, was the same symbol from the cave photo. Circle. 3 legs. But this time, something else had been added beside it. A word scratched into the rock. It watches. Grayson didn't speak. Because suddenly, she could hear it too. The faint sound of something moving in the corridor ahead. Something dragging. Something breathing. They weren't alone. August 16th, 2024. Location, underground facility. Section 4B, Olympic National Park. The light on Grayson's helmet flickered once, then steadied as she stepped farther into the corridor. She kept her voice low. "Nolan, do you hear that?" He nodded, listening. It wasn't just the echo of their own boots on concrete. It was something ahead, soft and irregular. A scrape, and then silence. Like something moving just out of view, retreating each time they advanced. "Could be an animal," he offered, but even he didn't believe it. The air grew colder as they passed the threshold into the next chamber. Inside, the walls were painted a sickly gray-green. The ceiling had partially collapsed on one side, but a rusted cot and a metal desk still stood upright. On the wall was another sign. Observation Room. Protocol Level 3. Grayson approached the desk. Dust layered everything, but there was still a clipboard resting on top. She brushed it off. Nolan came up beside her. "Anything useful?" Grayson tilted the board toward her light. "It's a roster or a log. Dates, initials, and times." She flipped to the final page. August 20th, 1999. The same day Samantha and Jordan vanished. The entry read only, "Internal lockdown. Echo trigger. No clearance for exit. Unmapped opening identified." Grayson met Nolan's eyes. They knew. Someone down here knew there was another cave mouth, and they shut the place down because of it. They sealed people inside, or something else. Back at the surface, the hatch was secured again for the night. But Grayson didn't sleep. She sat in her car with the interior light off, staring out through the windshield at the treetops swaying above. The symbol etched in the cave walls burned behind her eyes. The phrase, "It watches," looped through her thoughts. The forensic team had barely scratched the surface of Section 4B. The corridors could run for miles, but the few samples they had taken revealed something else. Unusually high levels of iron, sulfur, and heat signatures deeper underground, suggesting geothermal vents, or something artificial still emitting power. The place wasn't entirely dead, and that disturbed her more than anything. 2 days later, a retired park geologist named Dr. Helen Carruthers arrived at the command post outside the ridge. She had spent 20 years mapping subterranean fault lines in the Pacific Northwest before taking early retirement in 2003, quietly, after a series of unpublicized contract surveys for the Department of the Interior. Grayson met her at the ranger cabin and handed her the photo of the cave. Helen studied it in silence for almost a full minute. Then, "You found it. You've seen that cave before?" Grayson asked. "I was flown in for a soil collapse study in 1998. Said it was a landslide review, but it wasn't. They had a team down there already. Seismologists, military contractors. No identification, just numbers on their jumpsuits." Grayson frowned. "What were they looking for?" Helen hesitated. "Not what. Where?" Grayson waited. "They were mapping resonance," she said finally. "Sound that travels beneath the rock, echoes that didn't match expected patterns. Some came back inverted, like something was listening. Grayson's skin crawled. You're saying the mountain was responding? I'm saying they sealed it for a reason. I left after 3 days. Told them I didn't want the hazard pay. Grayson nodded slowly. We believe 2 missing hikers stumbled across this place in 1999. Samantha Blake and Jordan Riley. We think they entered the cave system just before your team left. Helen didn't blink. Then they're still down there. That evening, after most of the team had packed up, Grayson opened the recovered notebook again. The final entries, barely legible in smeared ink, hinted at something beyond isolation and fear. One line, underlined twice, stood out now. We tried the surface. We tried screaming. But it hears us first. The only way out is forward. She stared at the sentence, then rose from her chair. Nolan was asleep in a cot. Outside, the wind had died down. The trees no longer rustled. She picked up her flashlight and walked quietly back to the hatch. The ladder groaned again beneath her weight as she descended into the dark. Her light swept side to side as she moved down the corridor she had already explored. But now, her eyes were on the floor, looking for markings, scratches, trails. She found them. Just past the observation room, at the base of a crumbling wall, was a scuffed path in the dust. Wide drag marks, human length. And beside them, bare footprints. Too small for Jordan, likely Samantha's, but smeared, slurred, like she had been stumbling, like she had been pulled. And on the far wall, scrawled in red charcoal, "Don't look back." Grayson stepped backward instinctively, but she didn't turn. She just listened. And this time, there was no sound, no scrape, no breath, just silence. August 18th, 2024. Location, underground facility. Corridor past Section 4. B. Olympic National Park. The next morning, Grayson brought a second flashlight, a recorder, and a printed copy of Samantha Blake's last known hiking permit. She clipped it to her vest. Not out of protocol. Out of something else. Something quiet and hard to name. Nolan caught up to her at the equipment trailer. "You're going back in. I need to see where the trail leads. Past the corridor. Past the message." He rubbed a hand across his face. "You really think she walked that far?" "I think she was trying to find her way out, and I think Jordan was already gone." They said nothing for a moment. Then Nolan unzipped a field pack and handed her a second radio. "Take this. Stay in touch every 10 minutes. You lose signal, you come back. No cowboyish, no lone wolf stuff." Grayson gave a small nod. "Copy that." She descended alone. The air was damper this time. The light from her helmet caught droplets clinging to the ceiling, the walls. It almost looked like condensation, except the rock was dry. The deeper she moved, the more the walls seemed to change, losing the square-cut geometry of the built corridors and blending into something more irregular. Like construction had stopped, and something older had taken over. She reached the warning again. "Don't look back." And this time, she stepped past it. The light narrowed. Her breath echoed louder. The dust on the ground gave way to slick stone, carved by time or pressure or something less explainable. The walls constricted, funneling her into a narrow chute before suddenly opening again. What she stepped into wasn't a chamber. It was a dome, 50 feet wide, maybe more. The ceiling arched like a cathedral, blackened with soot. At the far end stood a single structure, a metal chair bolted to a platform, ringed with rusted wires and a shattered plexiglass screen hanging above it. She moved toward it slowly. There was a panel beside the chair. On it, barely visible beneath the grime, ECHOSUBJECTSTATIONONE, AUDIOFEEDBACKISOLATION. Grayson's blood ran cold. She turned on her recorder. "This is Detective Elise Grayson. I've reached a chamber past Section 4B. The architecture has changed. Appears artificial but unrecorded in prior schematics. There is a chair mounted to the floor with wiring and a shattered screen. Labeling suggests this was some kind of monitoring station. Purpose unclear. She turned slowly, scanning the chamber. No exits, no signage. Just darkness and the remains of something experimental. Something human-shaped. Then her light caught movement. A flicker. Not a head, but reflected. She turned. Across the back wall of the dome, a mirror had been mounted behind the platform. Or what used to be a mirror. Now it was fractured, fogged with age. But in the center was a clean split, and something had been etched into the glass. "You hear it too." Grayson stared. Not a message to her. A message from someone else who'd been in that chair. Back at the surface, Nolan paced the command tent. 10 minutes, 15, 20. Her radio was silent. He pressed the call button. Static. Again. "Grayson, this is Nolan. Do you copy?" Nothing. He turned to Luis. The ranger turned overwatch. "How long since you heard from her?" Luis glanced at the console. 13 minutes. Last ping was stable. "Suit up," Nolan said. "We're going in." Grayson wasn't lost. She was waiting. Near the mirrored wall, she'd found something else tucked under the grated platform. Folded fabric, mold-stained but intact. A jacket, a size too small to be Jordan's. Red fleece, Samantha's color, and inside its pocket, an undeveloped roll of film, unlabeled, dry. She stood frozen, because next to it, tucked behind the base of the chair, was a necklace. Plastic butterfly charm, cracked down the middle. Cynthia had described it. Samantha's favorite. She'd worn it every single hike. Grayson backed away slowly. This was a final stop. Not a camp, not a shelter, a recording station, and Samantha had been here. From down the corridor came footsteps. Grayson turned, relief blooming, until she realized they weren't Nolan's. They were too light, too fast, too many. She killed her light instinctively. Silence. And then, the scraping. Low and rhythmic, like something crawling, like skin against stone. She pressed her back against the wall, heart pounding. A shadow passed through the far edge of her vision. Then another. Not human, not walking, not breathing. Whatever lived down here, it never left. She reached for her radio, thumb trembling on the call button. Before she could press it, a voice whispered, close, unmistakable. He never left the chair. Grayson turned the light on. But no one was there. August 18th, 2024. Later that evening. Location, underground facility. Return tunnel, Olympic National Park. Nolan's boots hit the concrete floor hard as he descended into the shaft. Luis followed close behind, breath sharp in the stale air. Their headlamps swept the corridor like searchlights, cutting through the dark ahead in nervous strokes. The last radio ping from Grayson had come from just past Section 4B. Then, nothing. Nolan pushed faster. They passed the corridor wall marked with "Don't look back," and Luis paused. "Sir, did she say anything about this?" Nolan didn't answer, because up ahead, the air had changed. It felt, like wet copper and old breath. Thick, dense. Every step felt like wading through invisible current. And then, they saw it. The dome. Grayson was crouched beneath the platform, eyes locked on the small objects in her hand. The butterfly necklace and the sealed film canister. She didn't speak when Nolan entered. Just held up the necklace. "She was here," she whispered. "Samantha, she made it this far." Nolan crouched beside her, lowering his voice. "Then where is she now?" Grayson slowly turned to the chair, staring at the straps still bolted to the metal arms. This wasn't just a research outpost, it was a test site for something acoustic or psychological. Maybe both. He scanned the walls. Did she leave anything else? Grayson pulled out the film roll. Unlabeled. Could be the last thing she documented. Luis approached, but something made him pause at the edge of the chamber. There's something wrong with this place, he murmured. It's like it's listening. Grayson turned sharply. What did you just say? I said it feels like… No, the word you used. Listening. Luis's brow furrowed. Yeah. Why? Grayson pulled out Jordan's recovered notebook and flipped back to one of the entries, her finger tapping the underlined line. The echoes don't come back right. Like they're not bouncing. They're being absorbed. Like it hears us. She looked up at the fractured mirror behind the chair, then slowly turned to the others. This dome, it's designed to amplify, but not sound. Attention. Luis backed up a step. Attention from what? The scraping sound answered for him. They didn't run. They couldn't. Whatever moved in the corridor ahead didn't make enough noise for feet or claws. It was more like a feeling, something brushing just beyond light, something that didn't need to be seen to be known. Grayson's breath slowed to near nothing. We leave, she whispered. Nolan nodded. No questions. They retraced their steps with lights off, radios silent, backs pressed to the tunnel wall. The hatch above couldn't come fast enough. When they finally reached it, Luis scrambled up the ladder first, radioing for surface unlock. Nolan followed. Grayson climbed last, her hand still wrapped tight around the butterfly charm. By 3 a.m., the hatch was sealed again. A new lock was installed. The perimeter expanded, but even inside the Ranger trailer, Grayson couldn't relax. The film roll sat in a plastic evidence bag on the table. Her fingers hovered near it like a trap ready to spring. You sure you want to process that here? Nolan asked. We could have the lab in Seattle handle it in the morning. No, she said. We can't wait. If Samantha documented what she saw, we need to know. Nolan exhaled and retrieved the field development kit. Together they worked in the red-lit washroom of the trailer. Tiny trays, drying clips, chemical fumes curling into the ceiling. One photo at a time came into focus. Most were darkness. Cave walls. Stone. Then a figure. Samantha. In profile. Alone. Holding the camera herself. Then another image. Blurred. But something behind her. Long, pale arms stretching toward the cave wall. Nolan leaned closer. That's not Jordan. Then came the final frame. It was vertical. Lit only by flashlight. The image showed a wide stone door, sealed with metal bolts. In front of it, on the floor, lay a red jacket and a pair of hiking boots, both placed side by side, neatly. And on the door, in the center, someone had written in large, jagged letters, I went in to make it stop. Grayson's voice was barely audible. She went deeper. Nolan said nothing. He didn't have to. Because deep beneath the mountain, beyond the dome, beyond the walls they hadn't yet reached, something had waited 25 years for someone to open that door again. August 19th, 2024. Location, Seattle, Washington, Forensic Imaging Lab. Grayson didn't sleep. She sat in the passenger seat of the forensic van as the morning light broke over the sound, watching the water ripple in motionless patterns. The photos Samantha had taken haunted her. The strange symmetry of the boots and jacket, the metal door sealed in stone, and the final, handwritten message. I went in to make it stop. What had she meant? What had she seen that made her step deeper, alone? The lab tech met them at the door. We processed the roll you sent ahead, digitized everything, but… He hesitated, shifting on his feet. There's something else. He led them to a screen already set up. It's not just what's on the film, it's what's under it. He clicked a key. A false color scan filled the monitor. This one, he said, tapping the final image. The metal door and boots. When we ran an infrared pass, we noticed unusual exposure below the emulsion layer, almost like a double imprint. He adjusted the display. The screen changed. Same photo, but now there were faint outlines beneath the surface. More lines, letters, a shape, and then it clarified. Behind the phrase "I went in to make it stop," something had been scrawled faintly in the upper corner, invisible to the naked eye. "If you follow, kill the lights." Grayson froze. It wasn't just a warning. It was a set of instructions. By late afternoon, Grayson and Nolan were back at the park perimeter. Luis had reinforced the entrance with a motion sensor grid and stationed 2 more rangers at the ridge overlook. The area was still technically under geological hazard review, but Grayson knew the cover wouldn't hold much longer. Once the media caught wind, they'd be swarming. "We go in tonight," she said. Nolan raised an eyebrow. "You serious? If that door still exists, and if Samantha went beyond it, we have to follow, before someone else does." Nolan exhaled, long and slow. "And the part about kill the lights?" Grayson held up a blackout headlamp. "We're prepared." That night, just after 9 p.m., they descended with no fanfare. Just the 3 of them. Grayson, Nolan, and Luis, carrying field kits, gear, and silent radios. The dome chamber felt colder, staler. They passed the chair, the mirror, the rusted wiring, and reached the rear wall. Grayson's heart thudded when she saw it. The door from Samantha's photograph. Real, heavy, reinforced with riveted steel. It looked like a bank vault embedded in rock, but hand-built. And beside it, almost exactly where it had appeared in the photo, were Samantha's boots and red jacket. Still there, untouched. Grayson knelt beside them. The jacket was stiff with age, but intact. She checked the inside pocket. Empty, but there were scratch marks on the wall beside the door. Small, frantic, etched with something sharp. A knife, a stone. They formed a crude message. "Stay in the dark." Luis murmured, "That can't be literal." Grayson shook her head. "What if it is?" They killed their headlamps. Now only the dim ambient light from their blackout-safe chem sticks remained. Nolan examined the door frame. No visible locking mechanism. Looks like it opens inward, if it opens at all. Grayson pressed her hands against the metal. It gave, just barely. A grinding sound echoed into the tunnel as the door cracked open. The air that came out was thick, wet, warmer than the rest. They stepped through. It was a passageway, carved into stone but smoothed by tools or machines. The walls had metal ribs, like bracing, but much of it had corroded. The ceiling arched low, forcing them to duck. The deeper they went, the more it smelled like earth and something else, like rusted water and something long dead. They moved in silence for nearly 5 minutes. Then, up ahead, movement, not fast, not threatening, just someone. A figure, limping. Samantha. They froze. The silhouette ahead stopped, then turned. Her hair was long, her frame thin, clothes torn and discolored by time, but her face. Grayson's throat locked. It was Samantha, alive. She blinked in the dark, then raised a single trembling finger to her lips. Shh. Then pointed down. Not forward. Down. Grayson's light caught the edges of a vent shaft, maybe once a service crawlway. Luis whispered, "She's trying to tell us something." Samantha mouthed the words again. "Don't look, don't speak, don't light." Then she vanished into the dark. Grayson moved toward the shaft. Her boots landed on cold metal. She looked down and froze, because inside the crawl space, barely visible in the green glow of her chem light, were dozens of tiny carvings lining the interior wall. Symbols, faces, names, all scratched by someone trapped down there, someone counting time, someone who never left. August 19th, 2024, late night. Location, crawl shaft below sub-level passage, Olympic National Park. Grayson lowered herself into the shaft first, her back pressed against one side, boots bracing carefully against the other. The metal rungs lining the walls had long since rusted away, now just jagged anchors and handholds. The air inside was hotter, moist, alive. Louise stayed above, watching the corridor with a silent rifle in hand. Nolan followed Grayson down a moment later, keeping 2 meters behind. The moment both of them reached the bottom, the temperature shifted. The light from their chem sticks barely cut the thick humidity around them. Grayson swept hers forward and froze. She had expected another corridor, a cell, a dead end. Instead, the shaft emptied into a narrow stone antechamber, its walls covered floor to ceiling with writing. Charcoal, rust, blood, scratched fingernails. Don't say its name. It crawls beneath the breath. It listens through your bones. We heard the hissing before the wall opened. Some messages repeated. Some were scrawled over others. But one appeared in sharp lines, deep and deliberate. And in what looked like Samantha's handwriting. Jordan never made it past the dome. I kept walking. I shouldn't have. Nolan ran his light across the far wall. A small pack was wedged into a crevice. Inside, an old analog voice recorder. Grayson turned to him. "You brought batteries?" He nodded. They inserted fresh ones and hit play. A woman's voice, weak, trembling, filled the space. August 22nd, maybe. No daylight, no clocks. I went past the platform, down where the air got warm. I saw the chair. I saw it move. But Jordan wasn't in it. I thought I saw him. I followed. And it wasn't him. I think it wears your voice. That's how it learns. That's how it knows when you're alone. Grayson's hand trembled as she clicked pause. She knew what Samantha had meant. This thing didn't just feed on sound. It became it. Back at the surface, a local news station had caught wind of increased ranger activity and field tech presence in the park. A drone operator had filmed a clip of Grayson's team loading gear near the ridge. The footage was grainy, but something in the background had triggered panic online. A movement near the tree line. Pale, too tall, leaning wrong. Theories erupted. Message boards lit up. But what no one knew yet was that inside, beneath the forest, 3 people had already passed the boundary of what the government once tried to bury. And what they'd just found next was going to break it open. Past the carved antechamber, the tunnel veered left, into a space far too large to exist under that mountain without structural reinforcement. But it was there. A massive chamber, wider than a football field, shaped like a bowl. The ceiling was curved but fractured, crisscrossed with old rebar and collapsed piping. At the far end, barely visible under the green-blue hue of chem light, stood a second chair. Larger, more industrial. This one ringed with copper wiring and what looked like a containment cage, now broken open. And on the floor, a ring of marks. Not symbols, fingernails. Dozens, hundreds. Dragged inward, all pointing toward the chair. Louise whispered from above, peering down through the crawl shaft opening. "What the hell is that place?" Grayson answered without turning. "A trap, or maybe a stage." Nolan spotted something ahead, half buried beneath collapsed mesh flooring. Another camera, disposable. Same brand as Samantha's previous 2. This one caked in sediment and what looked like fungal bloom, but intact. Grayson bagged it. Beside it was a boot, women's, torn at the laces. The insole was marked with faded Sharpie ink, SB Wright. Grayson stood still. She dropped it on purpose. Nolan nodded. She was leaving us a line to follow. Then, from behind them, a snap. Grayson turned fast. Her light beam caught only swirling dust. But the air had changed again. Louise's voice crackled softly through the radio. "I just saw something move, in the shaft. It's tall, pale, no face, standing still, not breathing." Grayson's reply was firm. "Kill your light, now." Louise did, but the static that followed on the radio wasn't dead. It was breathing, and then words, distant, repeated, "You're close, you're close, you're close." Not from the radio. From the chair. August 20th, 2024. Location: Subterranean Chamber Theta, Olympic National Park. Grayson didn't move. The words kept cycling. "You're close, you're close." A recorded loop, a malfunction. Number. The voice was too recent, breathy, trembling, like it had only just been spoken. And worse, it sounded just like Samantha. Nolan stepped between her and the chair. "Grayson, step back, now!" But the voice didn't stop. The third repetition changed. "He's still here." That last word dropped into a chilling stillness. No echo, no breath, just wait. Then, click. The recorder Samantha had left in the antechamber turned itself back on inside Grayson's pack. There'd been no motion, no signal, just a sound. Static. Then a voice they hadn't heard before. Male, raspy, slow. Didn't mean to let her go, but she opened the door. Grayson's blood froze. It wasn't Jordan, and it wasn't human. By the time they climbed out of the shaft, Luis looked visibly shaken. His knuckles were white on his rifle. "There's something walking the upper corridor," he whispered. "It doesn't make noise unless it wants you to know it's there." Grayson didn't ask how he knew. He just knew. They returned to the dome. The temperature had dropped. Frost had begun to form on the interior walls, despite the geothermal heat below. Grayson turned to Luis. "Stay here. Guard the entrance. If anyone else comes, anyone, we don't let them in." Luis nodded. Grayson and Nolan ascended to the surface. Later that morning, back at the Seattle field office, Grayson laid out every photo Samantha had taken on the incident room wall. There were 12, 10 from inside the cave, one of the corridors, and the final image, the sealed door. Except now, viewed in sequence, it didn't make sense. Grayson paced. "She shot 12 exposures, but she carried 2 cameras. That means there should be more." Nolan nodded. One roll was never recovered. Grayson stepped closer to the final photo, the one of the metal door, the boots, the writing on the wall. She tilted it. The angle was wrong. "This wasn't taken as she approached the door," she whispered. "It was taken as she was leaving." Back in 1999, Samantha Blake's final journal entries, retrieved from a water-damaged notebook stuffed into her hiking pack, had been dismissed at the time as stress-induced delusion. They were never digitized, never entered into evidence. Until now. Nolan tracked down the retired evidence tech in charge of the Blake case. The man remembered it instantly, said it had always bothered him. That night, Grayson sat alone in her motel room, reading the faded ink across the page. "I saw Jordan again, or what was left of him. He was inside the wall. The chair is a lure. It listens until you sit down. Then it calls them. I keep hearing my own voice in the dark. If I leave, I bring it with me." And the last line, "So I stay. Not for me, for you, for anyone who comes looking." At sunrise, Grayson returned to the cave. Alone. No cameras, no backup. Luis had left his post. Radio found on the ground near the dome entrance. No sign of a struggle. Just drag marks. Same as the ones Grayson had seen on her first descent. Inside the dome, the air was different now. Not cold, not warm. Just empty. The chair sat in silence. The mirror was gone. Shattered on the floor in 1,000 pieces, all pointed outward, like something had burst through. Grayson stood in the middle of the chamber and whispered, "Samantha, I'm here." Nothing. Then the light flickered, and the mirror fragments pulsed faintly. Just once. Grayson turned on her chem light and reached into her pocket. The butterfly necklace, still whole. She set it on the chair and waited. August 21st, 2024. Location: Dome Chamber, Sub-Level Access, Olympic National Park. Grayson didn't sleep. She stayed in the chair, not strapped in, not restrained, just seated, like Samantha might have been 25 years ago, waiting for something that listened. The dome was completely silent now. Even her breath seemed muffled. Time lost its usual rhythm here. The walls held no sound, no echo. It was like being submerged in memory. And then, the light changed, not flickered, shifted, as though the dome had inhaled. From somewhere beyond the dark, footsteps, software wet, familiar, not rushing, not cautious, certain. 30 feet away, the corridor pulsed once with movement. Grayson rose, gripping her chem stick tightly, but kept her light aimed low. The air thickened again, like breath inside a diver's helmet. Then a voice. "You found the necklace." It was Samantha's voice, but the shape standing in the corridor was wrong. Too tall, too thin at the joints. The figure swayed. Arms limp. Eyes, no, sockets. Dark. "You shouldn't have come alone." Grayson didn't respond. Instead, she slowly pulled the roll of film from her jacket. Samantha's roll. The one with the final image of the door. "I think she left this for a reason," she said aloud. "I think she wanted someone to finish what she couldn't." The figure moved. No sound. Closer now, 3 feet from the threshold of the dome. "She went too deep," the voice whispered. "She stayed too long. She left something open." Then, silence. The figure stopped. Grayson lifted the chem light toward its face, and it vanished. An hour later, Nolan's voice crackled over the radio. He was approaching the ridge on foot, alone. Backup had been denied. The State Patrol wanted a full report before re-entering federal land. Grayson answered calmly. "Don't come in. Not yet." "Are you inside?" "Yes." "Status?" "I know where she went." 10 minutes later, Grayson descended into the crawl shaft again. The air was different now. Still warm, but motionless. The massive bowl-shaped chamber below, the one with the second chair, looked undisturbed. And yet the boot she had bagged earlier was gone. The camera, too. All that remained was a light. Software glowing, coming from behind the collapsed wall at the far end. Grayson crossed carefully. Rubble shifted beneath her feet. The light grew stronger. Behind the breach was a narrow service corridor, far older than the rest. Wires snaked along the ceiling like roots. Symbols lined the walls again, but this time they weren't scrawled by human hands. They were etched into the stone. A warning, or an invitation. She stepped into the passage. The light came from a small alcove. Inside was a crate, wooden, rotting. She opened it. A reel-to-reel tape recorder. Batteries exploded, film warped, but taped to the lid was a folded photo, creased, water-damaged, but still legible. Samantha, standing in front of the chair, holding up a finger to her lips. A timestamp at the bottom read, September 2nd, 1999. She had survived for weeks, alone, below ground. Grayson stared at the photo. Behind Samantha, barely visible in the dark, was something standing at the rear of the chamber. A blur, pale, eyeless, watching her from behind. Grayson returned to the dome just before sunrise. She stood where the mirror used to be. Only now, a new mirror had been mounted. Same shape, same size, but she hadn't brought it in. No one had. She approached. Her own reflection stared back, pale, dust-covered, wide-eyed, and then, in the mirror, a second figure stepped up behind her. She turned fast. Nothing. She looked again. Just her. But now her reflection was smiling. And she wasn't. August 22nd, 2024. Location, Base Command Trailer, Perimeter Site. Olympic National Park. Grayson came up just after dawn. Her boots were coated in red dust, her eyes bloodshot, unfocused. She didn't speak right away, just stepped into the command trailer and set the faded photo of Samantha on the desk in front of Nolan. She survived. Nolan leaned in, brow furrowed. "That's her?" Grayson nodded. "And the tape recorder?" "Destroyed. But the image confirms she was in the dome chamber, 2 weeks after she vanished. There's a timestamp." Nolan studied the blurred shape in the background. "You think that's what killed her?" Grayson didn't answer immediately. "I think that's what she was trying to contain." They logged the image, the photo timestamp, and began drafting a timeline. August 14th, 1999. Samantha and Jordan entered the park. August 16th, 1999. Reported missing. August 22nd, 1999. Journal entries suggest Jordan died in the dome. September 2nd, 1999. The photo. Samantha alive. Likely the last evidence of her seen alive. But what happened after that was still blank. Until Luis's pack was recovered. One of the rangers found it near the collapsed vent shaft. Unzipped. Inside, a second disposable camera Samantha had never used. Its film was untouched, and beneath it, tucked under the lining, a torn notebook page. Grayson unfolded it. "Don't bring light. It feeds on attention, it mirrors, it remembers your sound. Then, if you're hearing it in your own voice, you've already let it in." Grayson went still, because for the last 12 hours, every sound she'd heard inside the dome, every whisper, had sounded like her. That night, Nolan reviewed the reel-to-reel unit recovered from the crate. One channel was destroyed, but Channel B had preserved a faint audio line, warped, filtered, distant. He pressed play, and a child's voice came through, high, cracked. "Mom, it's cold down here." Then static, then the voice again. "I thought I was going to heaven, but I think I went the wrong way." Grayson's hands clenched. That wasn't Samantha's voice. That was a mimic. Back underground, the mirror was gone again. In its place, a scorched mark on the wall. No frame, no glass. Just a shadow burned into stone, the outline of a woman seated in the chair. No face, no features, just a figure etched in ash. Grayson stepped closer. As her chem light passed over the wall, faint etchings emerged from the soot, scratched around the outline like a halo. "I held it back, as long as I could, but it's listening through you now." Back at the surface, Nolan paced near the ridge, phone in hand. A call from Washington had come through. The Bureau was sending in a black site response team. Whatever this was, it had triggered a level 4 containment alert. But when he turned to tell Grayson, she was gone. She'd gone back in, alone. The dome chamber was silent when Grayson returned, but the chair was no longer empty. A figure sat there, head low, hair long, clothes torn, hands resting limp at her sides. Samantha. She didn't move. Grayson approached slowly. No breath, no pulse, but her eyes wide open, frozen in one direction. Looking past Grayson, toward the wall, toward a shape Grayson could not yet see. She reached forward and gently took Samantha's hand. And in that moment, the chair spoke. No machine, no speaker, just vibration through the stone itself. Another voice to carry me further. Grayson stepped back. The dome went dark. August 23rd, 2024. Location: sub-level dome chamber, Olympic National Park. Darkness had a texture here. It wasn't just the absence of light. It was presence, thick, aware, breathing beside her. Grayson stood motionless in the void of the dome. No chem stick, no headlamp, just her body in the black and the faint pressure of unseen walls drawing close. The voice had stopped, but something else had taken its place. A silence so deep it had weight. Then, Elise, her own voice, software familiar, spoken with the precise rhythm she used to answer her father's calls when she was 12. Don't leave me down here. Grayson gritted her teeth. No, she whispered. You're not me. But I was Samantha once. And I was Jordan. And I was Louise. A faint vibration spread through the stone under her boots. Every voice I've ever touched. I remember. Grayson stepped forward in the dark. Then remember this, she said. She pulled the butterfly necklace from her jacket, the one Samantha had left, and with it, the undeveloped second roll of film that had been in Louise's pack. She crushed the film in her palm, and the voice screamed. Not out loud, inside her skull. Above ground, the federal response team had arrived. 6 agents in dark tactical gear moved silently down the slope toward the dome entrance. Nolan stood just outside the hatch, radio gripped in one hand. Pulse racing. She's still inside, he said. The lead agent ignored him. We're sealing it. You can't, Nolan snapped. There's another person in there. She's alive. Then she's already gone, the agent replied. He turned to the others. Lock it. Inside the dome, Grayson had reached the center again. The chair was empty now, but the mirror had returned, mounted on the wall exactly where it had first appeared. She stepped in front of it and saw nothing. Not herself, not Samantha, only the dome, silent, motionless. She walked forward and through the mirror. What she entered was not physical, not a hallway, not a tunnel, but a memory. Shared. The scent of pine, a girl's laughter, a red hiking jacket left draped over a tree stump, then a flicker, and she was in the chair, strapped in, the dome humming. Jordan stood beside her, young, frightened, voice breaking. Don't look up, he whispered. Then silence again, the sound of her own breathing, and finally, freedom. Grayson gasped, stumbled forward, and found herself on the surface, collapsed just outside the dome entrance. The agents had sealed it, or thought they had, because when Grayson's eyes opened, they weren't alone. A woman stood at the tree line, thin, silent. Her red jacket clung to her shoulders like it had never aged a day. Nolan turned as he saw her. Sam! But the woman raised a finger to her lips and vanished. No footprints, no shadow, only the faintest whisper on the wind. Tell them I stayed. September 2nd, 2024. Location, FBI Field Office, Seattle. The dome was permanently sealed under federal order. All records were buried. The mountain zone was declared unstable and closed for good. Louise was never recovered. The chair was disassembled and removed. But the film, the one Grayson had crushed, revealed something unexpected when forensic imaging scanned the fragmented negative. One final, undeveloped frame. Samantha Blake, standing in front of the dome's mirror. Behind her, a dozen shadows. All her. All facing the glass. All whispering the same words. If you open it, it becomes you. The file was classified and locked away, but Grayson remembered every word. And sometimes, when she was alone, she still heard herself whisper back. October 18th, 2024. Location, personal storage locker, Kent, Washington. The key had been taped inside a copy of The Outsiders, Cynthia Blake's favorite book. Grayson found it weeks after the case was sealed, buried in a box of Samantha's recovered belongings. Locker 44B, registered under a fake name, paid 2 decades in advance. Inside, a single steel case, heavily taped, and a note. If you're reading this, it means you saw it too. I'm sorry I brought you down there. I never meant to be found. But if you did, you deserve to know what came next. S.B. Grayson opened the case. Inside were 3 objects. A 3rd disposable camera, film undeveloped. A cassette tape, labeled in red marker, "Do not listen in the dark." A mirror shard, wrapped in cloth. Grayson stared at the shard, and saw her own reflection. Not twisted, not possessed, just tired. Then the reflection blinked. Before she did,